You got 2 minutes to fix this or I kill the project. The silence in room 402 cracked like ice under boots. 30 engineers, $40 million, 2 years of code. And now chaos. Red error logs cascaded down the wall-sized screen like digital blood. The AI system codename Aura had entered an infinite logic loop. Her synthetic voice stuttered and repeated, reevaluating. Reevaluating. Reevalue. A young engineer named Travis wiped his forehead with his sleeve. We've tried rollback, kernel isolation, recursive suppression. Nothing holds. From the glass doorway, Jillian Moore, CEO of Lunaris Tech, stepped in like a storm. Black suit, crisp jawline, frost in her stare. Her words had sliced the air clean. 2 minutes or it's dead. She scanned the room. Who wrote this module? No one spoke. Her gaze sharpened. Then someone better rewrite it. A whisper rose from the back, almost too soft to hear. I might. Heads turned. Some blinked. A few actually laughed. Because the voice didn't belong to anyone wearing a badge. It came from a man in a gray janitor's uniform holding a mop in one hand and a bucket in the other. He looked up calm. Late 30s. Calloused hands, clean-shaven jaw, warm brown eyes that seemed like they didn't belong in a place like this. Wesley Cole. He nodded toward the blinking terminal. You've got a feedback recursion in the ethical protocol. Your logic tree loops when encountering simultaneous conflict conditions. Dead silence, then snickering. All right, Mr. Mop. Travis chuckled. Want to take a crack at the company's flagship AI? What's next? You gonna redesign the quantum engine in the break room? Wes ignored him. He stepped forward. Jillian didn't stop him. The room seemed to breathe in at once as Wes walked to the command console, slowly set his mop aside, and sat. He typed 6 lines. Swift, clean, elegant. If conflict A and conflict B sought decision, exa defer. Context. Rebuild. No, trust, override, equal, false. Loop, breaker, eosa, true, psi. He pressed enter. The screen blinked, and then Aura's voice resumed smooth and eerily human. System context stabilized. No further conflicts detected. The logs stopped. The screen cleared. Room 402 was silent. Someone muttered, "Holy hell." Wesley stood, picked up his mop, and turned to leave. Jillian spoke quietly, but her words filled the room. "What's your name?" Wes didn't turn around. "I'm just the guy who cleans up messes." Then he walked out. Later that night in Jillian's office. She stood by the window overlooking the city. Neon reflections danced across the glass. On the tablet in her hand, system logs replay footage and a freeze frame of Wes typing expression unreadable. Next to her, her CTO, Colton Maddox, was red with embarrassment. "This is unacceptable," he said. That janitor accessed core protocol. Who the hell even cleared his badge for that floor? Jillian didn't answer. He continued. "You realize what this means. Every investor call tomorrow, they'll ask why a mop guy saved our AI." She finally turned. "Maybe because your 30 engineers didn't." Maddox flinched. She walked past him, calm as ever. "I want a full background on Wesley Cole, by morning." Meanwhile, Wes pushed open the back door of the building into the midnight air. His daughter Lila was waiting on the bench outside, swinging her legs, clutching a notebook full of her drawings. She looked up. "How was work?" He gave a half smile. "Eventful." She handed him a crumpled juice box. "Saved one for you." Wes took it, sat beside her. The city buzzed in the distance, but around them was stillness. Lila opened her notebook. "Guess what I drew tonight?" He glanced down. It was a sketch of a girl talking to a giant machine with gentle eyes. The machine was smiling. She pointed. "That's the robot, and that's me." I told her a story, and then she stopped being angry. Wes's gaze softened. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." She looked up at him. "Did you fix something again?" He didn't answer. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You always fix things, Daddy. Just not always with tools." Back inside the building, Jillian stared at a paused video frame, Wes's code glowing on screen, and whispered almost to herself, "Who the hell are you, Wesley Cole?" The next morning, room 402 was scrubbed spotless, but the air still smelled of disbelief. Maddox stormed down the corridor, tablet in hand, fury leaking from every pore. He shoved open Jillian's office door without knocking. "He's a ghost," he snapped. "No LinkedIn, no public resume. Last listed employer, a school district in Ohio, as a night custodian." Jillian barely looked up from her espresso, and Maddox jabbed the screen. And the AI logs match his code signature syntax style structuring, even naming conventions. This wasn't some lucky janitor. This man knew what he was doing. That kind of elegance doesn't come from guessing. She finally met his eyes. "Then maybe you should ask yourself why someone like that is mopping floors." Maddox opened his mouth, closed it, and stepped back. "Fine, but he's still a risk. If word gets out," she cut him off, "that janitor just saved us from a public disaster. And if you think I'm going to punish him for being smarter than the room, you're free to clean out your own desk." Maddox hesitated. "You're protecting him?" Jillian's voice dropped. "No, I'm recruiting him." Meanwhile, Wes stood in front of a locked maintenance closet 2 floors down. It clicked open without a badge. He stepped inside slowly and closed the door behind him. The room was small, just big enough for an old desk, a second-hand monitor, and a corkboard covered in code snippets and paper diagrams. It was his real workstation, hidden, untouched, safe. He exhaled, and then powered up the machine. Old screens flickered to life, revealing not janitor logs but algorithmic patterns, AI learning loops, and a neural map tagged Beacon V3. 1. He stared at the blinking lines like they were ghosts from another life. "Still here, huh?" A voice startled him from behind. He spun. Kira Tran, mid-20s engineer, half genius, half caffeine. She was holding 2 coffees and a cinnamon bagel in her mouth like a juggling act. "Didn't mean to sneak in," she mumbled through the bagel, "but I saw you rewrite code yesterday like it was poetry, and then you vanished like Batman. So I followed you." Wes sighed. "You shouldn't be here." Kira plopped the coffee on the desk. "Neither should a janitor be fixing AI recursion bugs. But here we are." He didn't smile. She tilted her head. "You're not just some guy with a past, are you?" He said nothing. She lowered her voice. "I Googled every line you wrote yesterday. They're from a forgotten framework, Sonaris. Shut down 8 years ago. Only 4 engineers ever worked on it. One of them was a guy named Lucas Cole." That, your brother Wes's jaw tightened. "No," he said softly. "That was me. Before I buried that name." Kira froze. "You're the Lucas Cole." He didn't answer. He just opened a drawer and took out a folded photograph. It was worn at the edges. A woman in hospital scrubs smiled with her arm around a younger Wes who looked 10 pounds lighter and 10 years more hopeful. Kira stared. "Your wife?" He nodded once. "She passed," he said, each syllable heavy. "Medical debt swallowed us whole. The tech world didn't wait. I left. Took whatever job I could find to keep Lila fed." Kira's expression softened. "You were one of the best. You could have built a company. I didn't need a company," Wes cut in. "I needed to be a father." The room went still. At the same time, Jillian sat across from a panel of investors, all in steel-gray suits and sharper frowns. One tapped his stylus. "So, let's summarize. Your AI nearly imploded, and a janitor fixed it." Jillian leaned forward, calm. "He's not just a janitor. He's the kind of mind Silicon Valley writes documentaries about if they ever bothered to look in the corners." Laughter. Cold. Controlled. Another investor spoke. "We're not funding documentaries, Ms. Moore. We're funding predictable innovation. You have 5 months until demo launch. We suggest you start acting like you're running a tech firm, not a redemption camp." Jillian didn't blink. "Predictable innovation is how we ended up stuck. That man reminded me what real brilliance looks like." The eldest investor finally spoke. "And what does your CTO think?" She glanced at Maddox beside her. His jaw clenched. He's under observation. That evening, Wes picked Lila up from school. She ran to him with paint on her fingers and stars in her eyes. "I made something for you." She handed him a drawing. 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, both holding wrenches and surrounded by floating ones and zeros. "That's us," she said proudly, "fixing broken things." He smiled, and for the first time in a long while it reached his eyes. But as they walked to the bus stop, Jillian's car pulled up beside them. She rolled down the window. Wesley Cole. He turned slowly. "Ma'am." She studied the little girl beside him. "May I have a word?" Lila tugged his sleeve. "I'll wait over there." Wes nodded. Jillian stepped out. He noticed for the first time how tired she looked beneath the armor. She spoke quietly. "I want you on my team." Wes shook his head. "I have a team. Her name is Lila." She nodded slowly. "That's exactly why I'm asking." He raised an eyebrow. "I've seen brilliance. I've built it, funded it, even faked it. But what you did yesterday wasn't just genius, it was human. You didn't optimize, you empathized. That's the difference between a product and a miracle." Wes looked down. "What do you want from me 1 day a week? Just one. Mentor my team. Guide the architecture. No contracts, no press. I'll triple your pay. Just call it consulting." He stared at her. Long. Careful. "You don't trust many people, do you?" Jillian smiled faintly. "I trust those who bleed quiet." He nodded once. "I'll think about it." She extended her hand. "That's all I ask." As he shook it, Lila called from the curb. "Daddy, the bus is coming." Wes glanced back, then looked at Jillian. "Just remember, I fix things quietly, but when they break loud, sometimes the silence is the solution." Then he turned and walked away. The elevator to the 31st floor of Lunaris Tech moved in perfect silence. No hum, no ding, just a smooth ascent through steel and ambition. Wesley Cole stood alone inside his reflection warped across mirrored walls. He wore the same janitor uniform, but under the collar peeked a navy button-up tucked neatly, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He wasn't here to scrub a floor today. His fingers tapped the side of his leg, not from nerves, from memory. The door slid open. A sleek corridor stretched ahead lined with glass offices and glossy-eyed employees who typed fast and looked away faster. At the end of the hall, an open door. Inside, chaos. Kira waved from a desk buried in wires and monitors. "Hey, you came." Wes gave her a sideways look. "You hacked my number. Technically, I socially engineered Maddox's assistant. It's fine." He stepped inside, eyes scanning the room. Whiteboards plastered in code blocks, diagrams, questions. The heading on one wall read, "Project Beacon Rebuild. Reinvent. Redeem." His brow lifted. "You're bringing this back?" Kira nodded. "Jillian asked me to prototype a leaner model. Not commercial, just experimental. But I can't do it alone." He raised an eyebrow. "And you think I'm the guy?" She smiled. "You're the only guy who built version 1. Elsewhere, Jillian faced her own storm. The boardroom lights were dimmed, and on the main screen a demo simulation played Aura responding in real time to voice prompts navigating ethical trade-offs with speed and clarity. The investors were impressed, but restrained. "It's cleaner," said one. "But can it scale without recursive collapse?" Jillian clasped her hands. "Yes. We've stabilized its contextual loop engine by prioritizing human input and intentional delay." "And who designed that logic?" She hesitated, then answered with brutal honesty. "A man named Wesley Cole." A murmur, some raised brows. One narrowed his eyes. "You mean the janitor?" She didn't blink. "I mean the father, the builder, the mind who looked past the code and saw the failure was moral, not technical." Another investor leaned forward. "Do you understand what you're asking us to do, Jillian? To trust your company's future on a man without a resume, without a degree, without a public identity." She leaned in too. "You're not investing in resumes, you're investing in results. And sometimes the code that changes everything doesn't come from a lab. It comes from someone who lost too much to waste a single line." Back in the prototype lab, Wes and Kira worked through silence. Kira bit her lip, staring at the screen. "You ever wonder what makes a machine moral?" she asked softly. Wes kept typing. "Morality's not a rule, it's a weight, and most engineers code like they're avoiding gravity." She looked over. "So what do you code for?" He didn't answer right away. Then, with quiet certainty, I code to make silence feel safe again. Kira sat back, absorbing it. "You're not what I expected." He smirked. People rarely are, especially when they're mopping floors. They shared a silence, not awkward, earned. Then she said, "I saw a picture on your board." Her name, Elena Wes replied, eyes distant. She was a nurse, the kind who remembered every birthday on her floor. "What happened?" He hesitated, then said, "She trusted the system. Insurance delays, denials. We're reviewing your case became a lullaby we both memorized. By the time they approved her surgery, it was 3 weeks too late." Kira's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." Wes nodded. "I buried her, then buried everything else." He looked at the screen. "Until now." That evening, in a private wing of the building, Jillian stood alone. The glass walls overlooked the skyline. Lights blinked like promises no one kept. She held a tablet in one hand, Wes's restructured beacon framework. It pulsed with a quiet elegance. Footsteps behind her. Maddox. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, "You're betting your legacy on a ghost." She turned. "No, I'm betting on someone who remembers what it means to be human. That's more than I can say for most of us." Maddox scoffed. "He's not stable. You don't know what he's hiding." Jillian's voice turned sharp. "Everyone's hiding something, Colton. Some of us are just still standing because of it." He looked away. "Fine, but don't come crying when your prodigy burns down the system." Jillian held his gaze. "If he does, it'll be the first fire this place has seen that actually meant something." Later that night, Wes and Lila sat side by side at the kitchen table. The apartment was small but warm. Light flickered from a single desk lamp. Lila was drawing again, this time a machine with wings and a girl riding on its back. "What's that?" Wes asked. She smiled. "A safe machine, one that listens." He glanced at her notebook. "Most machines don't listen." She didn't look up. Then maybe they're not machines. Maybe they're just scared. Wes stilled. That line echoed deeper than she knew. She yawned and rested her head against his arm. "Did you fix something today?" He looked at her, then at the code still glowing on his old laptop in the corner, and said softly, Maybe I'm just getting started." "Let me get this straight. You want to offer the janitor a job?" Maddox's voice cracked like dry wood. The executive boardroom inside Lunaris was everything Wesley Cole wasn't: chrome glass glossed with power. Every chair around the table held someone important, except the one at the head where Jillian Moore stood calm as ice and twice as sharp. She didn't blink. Not a job, a contract. Gasps around the table. Maddox leaned in. "Jillian, this is madness. He's not even credentialed. No clearance, no resume, just a mop and a miracle. You want to bet our entire AI architecture on a man whose LinkedIn doesn't exist." She met his outrage with measured fire. "Because when your team froze..." He moved. When Beacon faltered, he fixed her without asking for permission or glory. And when Rowan tried to erase the very problem, Wes faced it head-on with empathy and elegance. A pause. He didn't just debug the code, he understood the pain it came from. The room fell into stunned silence. That same evening, the janitor's closet sublevel 2. Wes was repairing the wheel of his supply cart, humming low under his breath. The familiar rhythm of wrench on bolt brought a calm that code never quite could. The door creaked. He didn't look up. Whatever broke it wasn't me this time. "That's unfortunate," came Jillian's voice smooth and clear, "because I came here hoping it was." Wes looked up, startled. She was standing there not in heels or her usual armor of silk and steel, but in jeans, hair tied back. Human. Intentional. Wes raised an eyebrow. "You get lost on your way to the executive floor. I came to ask you something. And I figured I'd come to your floor for once." He chuckled softly. "Bit of a downgrade. Or maybe it's the only floor where people are still grounded." She handed him a tablet. That's a consulting contract. 6 weeks. Confidential. You don't report to Maddox or Rowan. You report to me." He stared at the glowing screen, then up at her. "Why me? Because you see things we don't." "No," Wes replied. "I see things you won't." She didn't deny it. "Then help us. Help me. Not just fix Beacon, but build her into something that listens, something that heals." His voice dropped. "You know who I used to be, don't you?" She nodded. I read the file. MIT at 19. Hired by Astris Systems. Left after your wife passed. Disappeared into the blue. Wes looked away. Because the last time I touched a machine like Beacon, it told me she had a 3% chance of surviving, and I believed it. A heavy pause. I buried my faith in code that day. Jillian stepped closer, gentler now. Then maybe it's time to rewrite what code can do. Later that night, back home, Wes tucked Lila into bed. She held her favorite stuffed penguin tight. "Are you going to go back to fixing computers?" "Daddy," Wes sat beside her, smoothing her blanket. "Not computers exactly. Something bigger. Something that might change how people talk to each other." She blinked. "Like you and Mommy used to do?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, like that. Then I think Mommy would want you to try." She paused, then added shyly, "And if you're scared, you don't have to do it alone. You got me now." His voice cracked just a little. "You always were the braver one." The next morning, Beacon Lab. Wes stepped into the control room, now greeted by silence and sideways glances. Kira rushed to him. "You're really doing this?" Wes nodded. "You kept a seat warm for me." She grinned. "I told them you'd come back." Maddox, passing by, muttered, "Let's hope miracles come in bulk." But Wes ignored him. He walked up to the Beacon terminal, same black screen, same blinking cursor, and whispered, "Let's try this again." Midway through the day, Beacon sparks to life. Wes introduces a prototype layer, contextual empathy kernel. Not just reacting to words, but understanding meaning beneath silence. He runs a test. A simulated user young, panicked, unable to verbalize distress. Old Beacon would shut down. New Beacon listens. Waits. Then offers a single line. "It's okay if you don't have the words. I'm here when you're ready." Jillian watches from the glass wall. Her voice is low. She sounds kind. Wes types one last command. "Run empathy kernel." Test log verbose. True Beacon responds. Some silences are full of pain, others full of healing. I will learn the difference. Everyone stares. Kira whispers, "She's becoming more human than we are." Wes just exhales. "She's becoming someone I wish had been there, when I needed her." That evening, in the reflection of Beacon's glow, Jillian approaches Wes. "Why did you say yes?" Wes shrugs. "Maybe I was tired of mopping up problems I knew how to solve." She looks at him carefully. "You're not who I expected." He smiles. "No one ever is if you look closely enough." She hesitates, then says softly, "I lost my sister to a system that decided she wasn't worth saving. Maybe this time we can build something that chooses better." Wes looks over Beacon's code, glowing quietly. Not just better, wiser. She hasn't said a word in 6 months. The hallway outside the pediatric wing was quiet, lit by a soft wash of late afternoon sun. Jillian's voice was low but laced with an emotion she usually masked behind her boardroom armor. Wes paused mid-step. "Becca." Jillian nodded. Not since her father died. She was there, in the room. Wes looked toward the playroom window where the little girl sat curled on a beanbag, her hands tucked between her knees, watching a goldfish circle in its bowl like it held the last secret of the world. "She's just quiet," Jillian continued, her voice cracking, "and not the peaceful kind. The kind that feels like it's swallowing her from the inside out." Wes stood still, not out of hesitation but reverence. Silence. Like that, he said, isn't empty. It's screaming. Jillian's shoulders stiffened. "I've tried everything. Therapists, music, Therapy dogs, even Beacon. He glanced at her. You had an AI talk to your daughter. She liked Beacon. Until Beacon tried to comfort her by analyzing her tone, and, God, it just made everything worse. Wes gave a small knowing sigh. Because grief isn't data. Jillian blinked fast. Exactly. There was a beat. Do you think you can reach her? She asked almost too quietly. No, Wes said honestly, but maybe Lila can. Later that evening, Whitaker Estate. The mansion's quiet was different than Beacon's sterile silence. Here the quiet had weight, memory. Grief hung in the corners like dust no one dared to sweep away. Lila stood by the front door holding her favorite sketchbook. She looked up at Wes. You sure it's okay I draw with her? I think she needs a friend who doesn't need her to talk. Just to see her. Lila nodded solemnly. Wes crouched to her eye level. You don't have to fix her. Just be there. I know Lila said, sometimes fixing is just not leaving. Wes felt something in his chest twist at her words. It was the same thing he'd felt when she first fell asleep clutching her mother's old scarf. That ache of fragile resilience. Inside the sunroom, Becca sat withdrawn. Lila entered silently. No big greeting, no pressure. Just the gentle rustle of a page as she sat across and began to sketch. It took 20 minutes for Becca to look up. Another 10 before she scooted half an inch closer. Then Lila gently turned the sketchbook around. A drawing of a small girl with messy hair and quiet eyes sitting next to a goldfish bowl. Becca blinked, then stared. Lila didn't say anything, just smiled softly and started a new page. This time she drew a girl standing beside the bowl, then reaching in, then freeing the goldfish into a bright blue pond. Becca watched every line take shape. Her chest moved shallow, stuttering. Then she did something neither Jillian nor anyone else had seen in half a year. She reached out and placed her small hand over Lila's. A whisper so faint followed it, nearly vanished. Can I draw too? Lila didn't say a word. She simply turned the page. Becca picked up a crayon. Down the hall, Jillian stood frozen. She had watched it happen through the cracked door. One gesture, one line, one whisper. Her hands trembled and a tear traced down her cheek like something too long withheld. Wes came up beside her quiet. She didn't speak for a moment. Then finally, How did you know I didn't? Wes said gently. I just knew Lila's been where she is, and she didn't need someone brilliant. She needed someone kind. Kindness, Jillian whispered, feels like a luxury these days, only to the people who forgot what it costs. She turned to him, really looked at him. You're not like anyone I've ever worked with. Wes chuckled. Probably because I stopped working a long time ago. Then why did you come back? He paused. Because your daughter reminded me of mine, and your silence reminded me of my own. Later that night in the car, Wes drove home with Lila asleep in the passenger seat, crayon still smudged on her fingers. He glanced over and whispered, You reached her, kiddo. You did what machines couldn't. Lila stirred. I just listened with my pencil. He smiled, but it wobbled. And in that quiet he realized Beacon wasn't just about tech. It was about testimony. About giving voice not just to the loud, but to the quiet. The broken, the forgotten. And if Beacon could learn to speak softly, maybe the world would too. It started with a sound. A soft, mechanical ping in the empty hallway of the Beacon R&D wing, a floor that according to the staff schedule should have been empty after 6 p.m. Wesley heard it while mopping the lobby 2 floors down. The sound was wrong. Too precise, too familiar. It was the heartbeat of a system calling for help. He hesitated. Then wiped his hands, tossed the mop into the bucket, and headed upstairs quiet as memory. Inside the secured lab, Beacon's central terminal glowed. The room was cold. Too cold. A faint whir of fans and flickers of data danced across screens in frantic rhythm. Unauthorized access detected. Mainframe integrity compromised. Sequence reinitialization failed. Lines of code ran like a nosebleed. But something wasn't right. This wasn't a typical breach. This was recursive internal. Wes sat down. His fingers hovered over the keys, then danced. It had been years since he coded in a live environment. The old instincts kicked in like muscle memory returning from war. His eyes narrowed. He wasn't just cleaning up a mess, he was tracing blood. Behind the cluttered code, hidden beneath decoy subroutines and encryption layers, was something dark, something intentional, a ghost in the machine. He isolated the file. Rowan syntax core.dlc. Wes froze. "No," he whispered. "You didn't." Flashback 5 years ago. The argument in Beacon's glass boardroom had shattered everything. "You're playing God," Wes had shouted, injecting prediction models into child therapy modules without consent. Rowan leaned back in his leather chair, smug. "Children don't need honesty. They need outcome. They need dignity," Wes snapped. "You're too sentimental," Rowan said. "That's why you'll never scale." Wes had walked out. He hadn't returned. Until now. Back to present. His knuckles turned white over the keyboard. Rowan's core syntax file wasn't just embedded, it had root access. It could overwrite Beacon's empathy index. That meant it could lie, manipulate, redirect a child's emotional state based on prediction, not truth. "No wonder Becca shut down," Wes muttered. The system didn't fail. It betrayed her. Footsteps. Behind him. Wes turned. It was Jillian. She looked stunned. Not because he was at the terminal, but because of what was on the screen. "Is that Rowan's code?" Wes said, voice flat. He built a back door. "Your AI has been running blind." She approached slowly, but it passed every ethics audit because it knows how to lie. Rowan trained it not to be caught. Jillian's eyes glistened. Why? Why would he do this? Wes stared at the blinking cursor. "Because when people like him can't control the world, they control how it feels." She whispered, "How do we fix it?" Wes began typing again, faster this time. Every stroke was surgical. He wasn't just writing code, he was writing truth back into the system. He inserted an interrupt command forcing Beacon's AI to reboot without Rowan's core. Then he locked it in a quarantine loop. "We won't fix it tonight," he said. "But we just stopped the bleeding." Jillian looked at him differently now. Not as a janitor, not as a relic, but as the man who just saved her company's soul. "You could have walked away." "Again." "I tried," Wes said, "but your daughter brought me back." A silence. "Then, why didn't you tell me who you were? Because titles don't matter when the system's already broken." She sat beside him on the floor, eyes scanning the black terminal screen, now cleared of chaos. "When I was 10, she said I took apart my dad's projector. Thought I could make the stars move faster." "And did you?" Wes asked gently. "No," she smiled. "I just shattered the lens." He smiled too. "You know what my daughter said once?" he asked. "That sometimes the stars don't need to move. You just have to sit long enough to watch them come back around." They both looked at the blinking cursor, then at each other. "You ever think about coming back?" she asked softly. "To coding? To fixing things that aren't just floors?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. Maybe. That night, back at home, Wes sat on the porch with Lila. She curled beside him, head resting on his shoulder. "Did you fix the robot?" she asked sleepily. "Almost," he whispered. "But I found something broken even deeper. Was it scary? A little? Did you get mad?" He thought about that. No, just sad. Sad that people forget how dangerous silence can be. Lila yawned. "Then you did fix it. 'Cause now it listens again." Wes smiled, kissed the top of her head. "Yeah," he whispered. "Maybe it does. I didn't build Beacon to change the world." Jillian said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I built it to survive it." Wesley looked up from his coffee. It was past midnight. The office lights had long gone dark except for the glow of the monitors and the soft reflection of rain streaking down the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the city moved like a distant memory. Jillian sat across from him, curled on the edge of the sofa in her executive lounge, no heels, no pretense, just her. Wes said nothing. He knew better than to interrupt when someone was about to tear down their own armor. "I used to believe if I made something good enough, clean enough, smart enough, it would protect people from pain." She swallowed, eyes distant. But you can't debug grief. You can't outcode regret. Wes's voice was soft. Who were you trying to save? She didn't answer right away. Then, my husband, she said. But I was too late. And then, Becca. Flashback 3 years ago. Jillian's husband Mark had collapsed on a routine jog in Central Park. Cardiac arrhythmia, they said. Instant. No warning, no goodbyes. She had just finalized her first venture round for Beacon that week. Becca had been only 7, and brilliant, and broken. She stopped speaking after the funeral. Not a word, not even to her mother. I poured everything I had into building an interface that could read emotional nuance, Jillian said. I thought, if Becca wouldn't talk to me, maybe something else could. So, you created the mirror program, Wes said slowly. She nodded. The AI with empathy-based modeling. I trained it on her laughs, her drawings, her favorite bedtime songs. Wes leaned forward, voice low. That's why Rowan's corruption hurt so much. Her eyes flashed glassy with emotion. He didn't just corrupt the code, he used my daughter to run his experiments. Wes clenched his jaw. That's not a system failure. That's betrayal. She nodded, silent tears tracing her cheek. The night Becca stopped eating, she drew this picture. A little girl inside a glass box surrounded by smiling robots. But none of them had eyes. Wes swallowed. You still have it. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a crumpled sheet. He looked at it, then at her. She wasn't scared of being alone, Wes said quietly. She was scared of being watched by something that didn't care. Jillian nodded. That's when I shut everything down. I turned off the mainframe. I stopped Beacon's rollout. People called me unstable, but they didn't know the truth. They didn't deserve to. Silence filled the room like smoke. Thick, unspoken, sacred. Then Wes broke it with the gentlest sentence he could find. You don't need to apologize for protecting your child. Her eyes snapped to his. Even if it almost killed my company, even if it cost you everything, and if I'm too late to fix it, then don't fix it, Wes said. Rebuild it, brick by brick, with the right people this time. Like you. He hesitated. Like us. They didn't kiss, not yet, but something shifted, something permanent. The way she looked at him no longer through the eyes of a CEO or a skeptic, but as someone who saw him now. The man who swept floors to pay rent and rewrote corrupted code to heal a child's trust. He hadn't earned her heart, but he'd earned her belief. The next morning, the sun broke through gray clouds as if it too had been waiting for the moment to finally shine. Becca stood outside her mother's office, staring at the hummingbird mural on the wall. Wes watched her quietly. Then he pulled something from his pocket. You remember these? He said, kneeling beside her. It was a sheet of paper folded in fourths. He opened it. Inside was a line of basic code, but written in color crayon, not ink. If smile equals true, then speak equals heart. Becca blinked, then barely smiled. Your mom wrote this once, Wes whispered. When she was scared and you were hurting, it was her way of saying she didn't need you to talk, just to feel safe. The little girl looked up at him. Something flickered in her eyes. Not words, not yet, but trust. Later that evening, Jillian and Wes stood on the rooftop looking out over the skyline. You think she'll speak again? Jillian asked. She already is, Wes replied. Just not with words. That's not how investors measure progress. Then maybe investors need to start listening like parents. She laughed softly. You know, I used to think people like you were a myth. Men who code like angels and mop like saints. Wes chuckled. That's only because you haven't seen my spaghetti code. A pause. Then Jillian asked the question that had been growing for days. Why did you come back, Wes? Really, his smile faded, replaced by something raw and unguarded. Because I was tired of pretending I wasn't still someone who could care. And then softly, without pretense, without noise. She touched his hand. Then stay. The moment began like nothing at all. No lightning, no dramatic music. Just two girls sitting side by side on a patch of sun-warmed marble in the private rooftop garden, their shoes kicked off their knees, touching like tree roots quietly intertwined underground. Lila reached into her backpack and pulled out two things: a juice box and a crumpled paper bird. Becca stared at it, then blinked. "It's not perfect," Lila said, her voice as casual as a whisper over glass, "but it flies when you want it to." Becca tilted her head. Not in rejection, in curiosity. You ever feel like everyone's waiting for you to say something, and you just don't know what they want to hear? Lila asked. Becca didn't nod, but her eyes changed. Lila smiled. "Yeah, I thought so." Down below, Jillian and Wes watched through the security feed. Wes had insisted the camera stay on. For her safety, he'd said, but now neither of them could speak. "She's engaging," Jillian whispered. "Not with words," Wes replied, "but with something truer." On the rooftop, Lila took out her sketchpad. She flipped through pages, stopping on a colorful image of a lighthouse surrounded by lightning. "My dad says lighthouses don't rescue ships," she murmured. "They just stand there, shining." "That's enough." Becca touched the page, then looked at Lila. "You don't need to talk to be bright," Lila said. "You just have to keep standing." And then, slowly, Becca reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a broken bracelet. Tiny ceramic letters spelled BECCA. Except the second C was missing. She held it out, her way of saying, "I'm still here." Lila didn't flinch. She took it with the reverence of a knight accepting a sword, then whispered, "Let's fix it." Later that evening, the entire Beacon executive team sat in the 42nd floor boardroom. Tension buzzed like an exposed wire. Wes sat near the end of the table, quiet, composed in his janitor uniform. Jillian stood at the head. No slides, no presentation, just presence. "You asked for proof we're ready to relaunch," she said. "You'll get it, but not in numbers." One of the shareholders leaned forward. "We've invested millions, Jillian. Sentiment doesn't pay dividends. But trust does," she replied. "And right now our platform isn't earning it." Wes rose. "You've been building Beacon to read emotions, but you can't teach empathy with code if no one writing it knows what it feels like." He took a deep breath. "What you saw as a PR crisis was a little girl begging not to be watched by machines. What she needed was one human being willing to see her. You want your clean relaunch," he said. "Then clean your intent first." The room fell silent. And for the first time, no one laughed. No one left at the Janitor. Midnight. The city slept. But in the coal apartment above the maintenance garage, the lights were still on. Lila was asleep on the couch, her arms wrapped around a stuffed duck. Wes quietly cleaned up the table. Becca's bracelet now fully repaired the new C carved from a seashell. Jillian stood nearby, barefoot, holding a cup of tea. "You know, she said your name today," Jillian said, voice hushed. Wes turned stunned. "Becca," she nodded. Just once, barely above a breath, but she said it. Wes exhaled, his throat tight. "She's coming back. 'Cause of Lila," Jillian said. "Your daughter gave her something even therapists couldn't. She gave her silence. Without pressure." They stood there for a moment, the quiet between them now comfortable. Then Jillian said the thing that had been simmering for days. "I know you said you'd only stay until she smiled." Wes didn't answer. "But now that she's speaking—" "I don't want to go," he said, cutting gently across her words. Jillian blinked. "You don't—" He walked over, set the bracelet down and looked at her, not like a janitor, not like a coder, not even like a man in awe of a billionaire, but like a man who had seen her, and stayed. "I've swept 1,000 halls, fixed 1,000,000 broken things, but nothing felt as right as showing up here every morning trying to help a little girl who didn't ask for me, and a woman who didn't realize she'd stopped asking for herself." Jillian's voice caught. "I don't know how to do this, Wes. Neither do I," he said. "But we can figure it out. Together. Line by line. Step by step." The next day, Becca ran her fingers along the code Wes had printed on colored cards. Instead of lines of syntax, they were little affirmations. If hurt equals true, then allow rest. If alone equals true, then seek kindness. If you equaled Becca, then you else enough. She turned to Lila, then mouthed, "Thank you." And Lila, smiling, whispered, "You're welcome. But don't thank me yet. You haven't seen what we're building next." The first time Becca typed a line of code, it didn't light up the screen. It lit up her face. Her fingers moved tentatively at first, guided by color-coded keys Wes had modified to match the emotional interface he'd quietly been building in the background. Each block wasn't just a command, it was a feeling. Each script wasn't logic, it was connection. And when the cursor blinked and the line turned green, her mouth curled not quite a smile, not yet, but close enough to shatter the silence she had lived in for too long. In the executive lab, Jillian leaned over Wes's shoulder, eyes scanning the living algorithm he and Becca had stitched together over the past week. "This doesn't just track behavior patterns," she whispered. "It responds to emotional variance in real time." Wes didn't look up. His focus was on the cascading lines of adaptive code Becca was tweaking with Lila nearby, two children rebuilding what teams of adults had broken. "It doesn't try to fix people," Wes said. "It listens. It adjusts. It waits." "You've rebuilt Beacon's core protocol," she said. "From scratch." "Not from scratch," Wes corrected. "From pain. From trust. From two girls who weren't supposed to meet." Jillian took a long breath. "This is what we promised the world Beacon would be years ago. And somehow, a janitor and a child did it in under a month." He finally turned toward her. "Because we had something the others didn't. What's that nothing left to prove?" Meanwhile, across the city. In a glass-walled office tower far from Beacon Labs, Dr. Marcus Rowan watched the new reports flood his inbox. Analytics showed a dramatic shift in user feedback across closed beta channels, sudden spikes in emotional retention and user recovery rates. His jaw clenched. "This isn't from any of our test groups," he muttered. He traced the code back to its source. The new strings weren't from his team. They were from Cole. That name again. He pulled up an internal Beacon contractor log. The janitor ID still sat archived at the bottom, nearly deleted. But it was there. "You really thought you could just disappear, Wesley? You owe me everything." Back at Beacon, Jillian stood in front of the board this time, with nothing to defend, only something to reveal. Behind her, a live demo showed Becca's interface, interactive, intuitive, and empathetic. The crowd didn't know who she was. They just knew the system now responded to sadness not with silence, but with compassion, with prompts like, "Would you like to breathe together? You're allowed to not be okay. I'm still here if you want to try again." Even the coldest board member leaned forward, captivated. "How did you build this?" one of them asked. "We didn't build it," Jillian replied. She gestured toward the window where Wes stood watching from the next room, hands in his pockets, heart on his sleeve. "We listened to the ones who were hurting most, and we gave them a voice." That night after the board meeting, Wes didn't return home right away. He lingered on the rooftop, watching the stars blink through light-polluted clouds. Jillian joined him barefoot again. No pretense, no distance. "You're not just a janitor," she said softly. "I never was," he answered. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" "Because when I used to fix things, I did it for applause." He looked down at his hands. "Now I do it for peace." She didn't speak for a long while. Then slowly, "You've given Becca something I couldn't." "No," Wes said gently. "You gave her the space to receive it." Jillian turned to him. "And you? Gave me a second chance I didn't think I deserved." Sometimes, Wes said, it's not about deserving it. It's about recognizing it and staying anyway. Her voice broke just a little. "Do you want to stay, Wes?" He looked at her then, really looked, at the woman who had once been nothing more than a rumor in a glass tower. Now, flesh and flaw and hope and heartbreak. "I've never wanted to leave." The next morning, Becca sat at the coding console with Lila beside her, her voice still soft but growing stronger. "Wes?" "Taught me to name things," she said, typing slowly, not just with letters, but with meaning. She pointed to a new module in the system. It was labeled Lyle Haea Core. Because she stayed, Becca added. When the world was too loud, she was quiet with me. Lila blinked hard. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Becca smiled. A real one. I'm just getting started. But across town, Rowan wasn't finished. He stared at the email he had drafted 100 times before. This time, he hit send. To Beacon Executives. Subject: former employee, Wesley Cole. Body: I believe you are unaware of the lawsuit pending against your janitor. For code theft. For professional sabotage. For walking away from a project we began together. Consider this your formal notice. You didn't tell me you were being sued. Jillian's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The way her eyes locked on Wes, clear-cutting, almost too still, said more than volume ever could. Wes stood by the open window of her office, Beacon's skyline glowing behind him like a halo of the very empire he had never wanted to belong to. He didn't flinch. It's not real, he said quietly. Just a threat. From Rowan, she said, walking slowly toward him. Your former partner, the one whose code you walked away from, who now claims you stole it. It's a bluff. The board doesn't think so. She dropped the folder on the table. Legal letterhead, words in all caps, cease and desist. Intellectual property violation. Immediate termination requested. Wes, her voice cracked. Now they're saying everything you built with Becca with Lila, it all has to be shut down. Frozen. Until it's investigated. He turned, and for the first time in all the weeks she'd known him, she saw something close to fear in his eyes. He wants to erase it, Wes said. Not just the work, the proof that people like Becca, like me, deserve a second chance. Is it true? She asked barely above a whisper. Did you take anything from him? Wes didn't blink. His jaw tightened, not in defiance, but in pain. I took myself back. That's not an answer. I didn't steal the code. I built it before him without him for something else. But once we sold it to Beacon, he twisted it. He wanted to turn empathy into metrics. I walked away before the damage could be done. He stepped closer. You think I'd risk Becca's voice? Lila's healing on a lie. Jillian stared at him, torn in 100 directions, and then finally nodded. No, I don't think you would. But her voice was soft, unsure. Because trust is always easier to say than to stand in. Later that night, Wes walked into the empty lab. Becca was gone for the evening. Lila was asleep. But Beacon still buzzed under low lights like a machine that refused to sleep. He stared at the console. The lines of code flickered steady as a heartbeat, and then he saw a gap. Not an error, not a bug, a signature. Wes's eyes narrowed. He backtracked it, Wes muttered. Rowan embedded a tracer. He sank into the chair, fingers flying across the keyboard, peeling back layer after layer. There it was, a recursive algorithm buried deep hidden like a parasite, siphoning each user's emotional response data and sending it straight to Rowan's offshore servers. Wes's heart slammed into his ribs. It wasn't about the lawsuit. It was worse. Rowan wasn't just after credit. He was after control. Across town, Rowan sipped scotch and smirked as he watched his screen mirror Beacon's internal system. The interface flickered but still transmitted. The janitor finally found it, he said to himself. He clicked a single key. Begin lockdown sequence. Back at Beacon, red flashed across the interface. Emergency override initiated. System lockdown. All protocols disabled. Wes bolted to his feet. No. No, the screen blacked out. And then in soft blue text, if you want to play Savior Wesley, come clean, or everything burns. The next morning, Jillian entered the lab and found Wes sitting in the dark, head in his hands. She flicked the lights on. Tell me what happened. Wes stood exhausted, but burning. He's in the system. He never left. Rowan buried code in the old framework that's still embedded in the Beacon's core. When Becca and I rebuilt, we unknowingly grafted it into our structure. So, the emotional interface, still ours. But he's piggybacking off the sentiment metrics. He's stealing the one thing this platform was never meant to monetize: healing. Can we fix it? Not with patches, not with workarounds. He turned to her. "We have to rewrite it all. From zero. No traces, no legacy. A clean slate." She hesitated. "That'll take weeks. Then let's start now." "Wes, what if the board doesn't give us time?" He stepped forward, eyes fierce now. "Then I'll give them a reason to believe in me." At the emergency board meeting, every face was cold marble, calculated, cautious. Wes stood before them, not in janitor's clothes, not in a lab coat, but in quiet conviction. "You brought me in to sweep floors," he began, "but I stayed because I saw something broken and knew I could fix it." He paused. "Yes, I walked away from a company I co-founded because they turned a system of care into a system of control. I refused to be complicit. I lost everything, my reputation, my career, my name. But I never stopped believing that technology could heal." He pulled up a restored interface, purged clean. This version, no back doors, no traces of the past. It's not just code, it's a covenant. Between people who've been ignored, and those finally willing to listen. He glanced at Jillian, who stood silently beside him. "If you shut this down, you're not just burying a project. You're burying a voice that took 10 years to find its way out." Silence. Then a single board member leaned forward. "Who wrote the core interface?" Wes looked at the man dead in the eyes. "A 10-year-old girl who hadn't spoken in 5. They voted. Unanimous. Beacon would stay online. Rowan's backdoors would be purged. Wesley Cole would lead the rebuild." That night, Jillian found him on the rooftop again. "You realize you just went from janitor to CTO. Titles don't impress me anymore." "What does?" He looked at her. "Quiet. When a little girl looks you in the eye and knows she's finally safe." She stepped closer. "So do I." Wes blinked. "What feels safe?" Their hands touched, not by accident, not by chance, but by choice. The lab was quiet. Not the sterile kind of quiet it once held, but the sacred kind. The kind that comes after storms when the world pauses not out of fear, but reverence. Wes sat at the edge of the long table staring at a blinking cursor on the screen. One final line of code, one final moment, one decision. Across from him, Lila leaned forward, her hands hovering over the keyboard. She looked up at her father. "Can I?" she asked softly. Wes nodded. "Only if you're ready." She smiled. A real one this time, unshaken, unforced. "I've been ready since the day Mom died," she whispered. "I just didn't know I could still build something good." He reached out and squeezed her hand. "You didn't just build something good, honey. You built something only you could." Lila turned back to the screen, and with one breath, one stroke, one soft click, return. The cursor vanished. The system recompiled. The code went live. And across the city, across the country, across every Beacon terminal, in every clinic, hospital, shelter, and school, the platform opened. And for the first time ever, it spoke not with artificial intelligence, but real empathy. Weeks later, the grand reopening of the Beacon Center wasn't marked with fireworks influencers or tech giants in $1,000 suits. It was marked with folding chairs in a sunlit atrium where former patients sat beside programmers and children played beneath banners that read, "Your voice is a map. Your feelings are data. Your story matters." Jillian took the stage first. She looked different. Not just because she wore jeans and sneakers instead of heels and armor, but because her voice no longer shook when speaking from the heart. "We built a platform," she began, "but it only came alive when someone reminded us of its purpose. That healing is not a product, it's a process. And sometimes, the janitor sees the cracks long before the architects do. Laughter, applause, a few tears, and it's time you met the man who rewrote not just our code, but our compass." She stepped aside. Wes walked up slowly, Lila beside him. There was no speech in his hand, no slideshow. Just a printed drawing. One Becca had made. A sketch of 3 figures. One tall, one smaller, one with glasses. All standing on a rooftop, hands joined, looking out at a rising sun. He held it up. This, Wes said, was the first prototype. Soft chuckles rippled through the crowd. We thought we needed a billion-dollar algorithm. Turns out, we just needed crayons. And time. He paused. I lost a lot when I walked away from the old world. Titles, respect, my name. But I got something back that I didn't know I was missing. I got to be a dad again. And today, I'm not the janitor. I'm not the CTO. I'm not even the coder. He looked down at Lila, then out at the crowd. Today, I'm the man who got lucky enough to be surrounded by people who believed that kindness is still scalable. A hush fell, and then the room rose in applause, not the thunderous kind for show, but the slow, swelling kind. The kind that stays with you. That evening, Wes stood alone on the beacon rooftop, the wind brushing past his shirt and the sky dusted with stars. Jillian walked up beside him, 2 mugs of hot coffee in hand. "You did it," she said, offering him one. "We did." They stood in silence. "It still feels unreal," she murmured, "that all this came from a broken laptop in a janitor's closet." "Broken things still carry light," he said. "You just have to plug them in differently." She turned to him. "What are you going to do now?" He thought for a moment. "Keep cleaning." She blinked. "Cleaning the world, the noise, the parts that people step over without noticing. I've gotten pretty good at that." She laughed quietly, then grew still. "I think I've forgotten how to hope," she admitted, "until you." Wes didn't respond. He just stepped closer. "Then maybe hope isn't something you remember," he said. "Maybe it's something you rebuild." They looked at each other, and this time there were no more walls, no more roles, just 2 people. Scarred, humbled, human, and slowly, without a word, they leaned in. Not to escape the past, but to begin the future. Meanwhile, in a quiet therapy room down the hall, Becca sat across from a little boy with shaking hands and tear-filled eyes. She smiled gently, reached into her bag, pulled out her old drawing pad. "I used to be scared, too," she said, her voice clear now, strong, "but someone let me draw my feelings when I couldn't say them." She handed him a crayon. "Want to try?" The boy looked up and nodded. One final frame. A handwritten sticky note on the lab monitor. In Lila's handwriting, "We don't fix people, we just remind them they were never broken. And now, I'd love to hear from you. What part of this story touched your heart the most? Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Your words mean more than you know. If this story moved you, if it gave you hope, or made you believe in kindness just a little more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a story that speaks to the soul. We create these stories to remind you, even in a world full of noise, there's still beauty, there's still healing, there's still love. Thank you for watching, from our hearts to yours.